Good evening. Welcome to the Music Shelter Podcast. I'm your host, Visuel. Hip-hop music, like other genres, have had many phases of maturity and innovation. On this episode of the Music Shelter, we'll be reviewing different eras of hip-hop and getting feedback from hip-hop fans, from baby boomers that grew up during the birth of the genre to today's millennials. Hip-hop was birthed in New York City's South Bronx in the 1970s and was an established genre by the 1980s. The first glimpses of hip-hop came from a couple of guys that went by the names of Afrika Bambaataa and DJ Kool Herc.
This is DJ Kool Herc, the father of hip-hop.
Kool Herc figured out the formula to hip-hop by sampling disco music, which was popular at the time, on vinyl record. He realized that there were certain breaks in the songs of these records that people would really enjoy more than other parts of the song. These were called breakbeats. Using turntables, DJ Kool Herc then proceeded to go to that section of the record and repeated it or made it loop into a longer duration. This is how the genre and the hip-hop DJ developed. Although the DJ came first, it wasn't long before someone would pick up a microphone to sing along over that breakbeat. Afrika Bambaataa is known to have coined the term hip-hop by way of always starting his lyrics with a hip, a hop, a hippie, a hop, and so on. One of the first breakthroughs bridging hip-hop into the mainstream was a group called the Sugar Hill Gang, known mostly for their 1979 hit, Rapper's Delight, the first rap single to become a top 40 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. I played a couple of songs from this era to our panel of hip-hop listeners to get their initial thoughts on what came to mind. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear this?
It's old school, man.
Dancing.
Older style, Soul Train type music.
Their costume, like funky, hats and things like that.
What can you tell me about the origins of hip-hop?
Started back in the late 70s, early 80s. Not much.
It can go back to like jazz and everything like that, and then what produced out of that.
No, I don't know how it started.
Not too much, really.
Groups like Run DMC stepped into the scene in the early 80s and became one of the faces of the hip-hop culture.
Now Peter, Piper, pick peppers, but run rock, rhyme, Humpty, Dumpty, fell down. That's his art. Time, Jackie, nimble, what? Nimble, and he was quick, but jam, mass mud, faster, Jack's on Jay's dick.
We began to see hip-hop shift into mainstream with no signs of its momentum slowing down. Throughout the 80s, the DJ wasn't as much as a figure anymore as much as the MC. Lyricism started to become much more developed and taken more seriously and more complex, with lyricists like Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, and LL Cool J leading the way. By the late 80s into the 90s, we saw new school groups like De La Soul and more West Coast involvement like NWA making noise in the genre, raising the bar and paving the way for artists like Busta Rhymes and Snoop Dogg, which shaped today's modern sound of hip-hop. The 90s brought in many different changes and styles to the culture. We were introduced to the Wu-Tang Clan and the Bad Boy era led by Notorious B.I.G. and P. Diddy. Hip-hop was always generally made for and by the black and brown community, although there were groups early on like the Beastie Boys, which were Caucasians from Brooklyn, that were very popular with their party-style sound of hip-hop. Through the 90s mashup of styles also came Vanilla Ice, which became a commercial sensation with his 1990 hit Ice Ice Baby. Even with much success from these artists, white rappers were still not taken very seriously within the culture. It wasn't until 1999 where Dr. Dre discovered and signed rap mogul Eminem that hip-hop became super diverse, breaking the stigma of hip-hop being a black and brown only music genre. I asked our panel of hip-hop listeners about this shift in the culture. What were your thoughts when you first saw and heard Eminem and his music?
He was different. Well, he is different.
Something new. It was fresh. I was wild, dude.
I thought he was a little rebellious.
It was new age stuff. It was like edgy. It was the coolest white kid rapper type stuff for me.
I thought he was pretty original with his lyrics and his style of music.
How much would you say Eminem affected the hip-hop culture?
I think maybe he inspired others.
I think he encouraged more white rappers. He challenged, the other cultures to really bring their A game.
I think Eminem rejuvenated it. When Wu-Tang died off, and Eminem like came right to the rebound. I think he saved it.
Hip-hop had spread all over the world by the turn of the century. a lot of East versus West Coast rivalry began to diminish. In the US, we saw many demographics making a name for themselves with their own style and flavor of hip-hop, from the Dirty South to drill music to our current era of mumble rap, and a total free-for-all searching for the next sound in music influenced by hip-hop. What are your thoughts on today's hip-hop music?
I don't understand it. If I can't understand the lyrics, then obviously, even if the beat's good, I'm not going to listen to it.
Oh, I love it. All the new artists that are coming out.
I'm not really into it too much. I like more of the old school.
I think back then is better than today.
Hip-hop music has come a long way. With any culture, it's important we take a look back at its history and try to understand and respect its origins to further advance it. That wraps it up for this episode of The Music Shelter. Tune in next week as we'll be going through the top 10 one-hit wonders of the 90s. I'm Visual, and I'll catch you on the next one.